Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Koehler Group's Expansion into China webinar series. The title of today's webinar is Surviving the Downturn, How to Prepare and Steer Your Organization Proactively. To be able to succeed in China and to be profitable, organizations must move beyond operational efficiency to become more smart, fast, and agile. In fact, the company's market penetration strategies and specific goals have to be communicated effectively and put into execution by the management team on a daily basis. The application of proven and concrete management tools with a strong focus on a practical value is required across all levels of the organization and supports companies to mark their footprint in a challenging market and to finally be successful in China. I'm very pleased to have Mr. Johannes Görmer, Managing Director from AKTIV Management Asia Ltd, as our speaker today on developing this exact topic. Before we begin today's presentation, I would just like to settle some administrative matters. If the sound system is working, then we would appreciate if you could click on the hand button in the control panel to allow us to know that you can hear us clearly. If you are having audio technical difficulties, please note that you can dial into the webinar utilizing a telephone, whether mobile or a landline, and you can do that in the audio section of the control panel. Please note that today's session is being recorded, and together with the recording and the PDF of the PowerPoint, we will send that to all the attendees and registrants at the end of today's webinar. Now, as is typical with all of our webinar series, we do encourage our attendees to submit their questions and comments into the questions section of the control panel. So please do that. For those of you that are new to Koehler Group's webinar series, I'd just like to briefly introduce who we are. Koehler Group, a CSC company, provides a wide range of market entry consulting, incorporation, tax, accounting, and human resource services to companies that are looking to enter and expand in the Asian region, primarily in Hong Kong, Singapore, and China. We were established in 1979 and have grown to having just over 120 professionals located throughout our 10 offices within the region. Our main objective is to help companies create tailor-made solutions for their market entry and expansion, or even their exit from the region. One of our unique advantages is that we do speak over 10 languages internally and are able to speak with our clients in their mother tongue. A brief introduction about myself. My name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm a director at Koehler Group, and I will be the moderator for today's session. I've been with the firm since 2003, when I first opened our Shanghai office in China. I've grown our China operations to having 8 offices locally and just over 60 employees. I frequently advise clients on their market entry, their expansion, their acquisitions, as well as their liquidations from the Chinese market. And I'm co-author of our monthly magazine, ChinaInvest.biz. So without further ado, I'm going to leave the controls now to Johannes so that he can take over the presentation. Johannes?
Yes, thank you so much, Christina. Getting the presentation started. Okay. Thank you so much, Christina, for your introduction, and it's a pleasure for me being invited and to share what I have learned over the last years in management beyond borders, I would say, especially with multinationals in different industries and also among different regions of the global village. So good morning and good afternoon to those of you who are in China. Initially, let me have the chance to quickly introduce myself. I came over to China in 2012 when I was working on my MBA and living in this part of the world gave me kind of a broad view about how people do work in this part of the world, which attitudes are around and what it means for companies basically in interacting with with China and across the region in Asia Pacific. So what I do is that basically building up proactive management in Asia. That means from a perspective of a consultancy, looking at this topic now, how to survive the downturn. The downturn, what does it mean? We will have a look at this in a second. And basically, with proactive, which is an SME itself, so which gives myself a perspective of how an SME also works in China. And so when working with mainly multinationals and basically working in the area of leadership development, which is the core topic, I really gotten a better view of the specific challenges which we do face in China, which you might face in China. And today I'm striving to share and probably support some of your questions that you may have here as well. Okay, I'm getting a few technical issues here. Can you see the PowerPoint? Christina, can you give me a quick heads up?
We're still on the slide with your face on it.
All right, good. Then let's go ahead. So the downturn, the end is near, you could say, but when we look at it more clearly, we can see that basically this economical drop at the moment, some people describe it as that economical drop. My message is here that it's not a surprise, of course, for those of you who observe the market clearly. It will not be a surprise as well. And contrary to this, it's just a business cycle who goes up again. So we will see a growth in quality. This is the message here. So for this downturn now, it's happening, of course, we can see that, and but we will see also a growth in quality. And let's have a look at this, what it means for us. Okay. The agenda. Just a quick overview. Proactive, activating manpower. What is that? What does that mean? What are we? What is proactive? Just a quick overview, really quick. And then what are the top challenges in China out of our clients' perspective? We do have 7,000 training participants a year over several industries, several companies in our leadership and sales training. And this is what kind of is the few bullets to narrow it down later. So what is next? The journey from effectiveness to innovation. So how can we get actually a macro view on that? And what are the 8 cultural dimensions of development, leadership development, people development here? And basically then also a real case to share what does it mean and what do we do when we talk about management and action, because this is what basically we will need to survive the downturn, to go further and to achieve goals in China. Okay, as you can see, what we do is basically we provide service to our clients all over. You can see just a few bullets here with Europe and Russia and Asia. But we do also deliver a professional training in the Americas, in Australia, but basically or predominantly facing really the Asian region, because this is, we believe, where the show is going on and basically where a lot of influences come from. So with that kind of fast experience in consulting global companies with practical solutions, but yet the modern solutions, I would say, we do this with a blended learning concept which integrates what you can see on the screen, of course, web learning and so on. How do we see things, how do we do things is, I have to switch. We do deliver effective tools. That means how can people do things practically? How can people manage teams? What is practical training for us? We are willing to grow people and share new kind of actions that they can practically use, because the most people don't know how to be able to practically manage and communicate, especially across cultures. So we run for quick wins and a long-term impact, and this is what makes kind of a unique point to our services. So we ask our clients, what are your challenges? And the answer is basically, yeah, growing. We need to manage our growth. We need to, yeah, what I call mostly, they have a pioneer workforce. That means they need to put their strategies and their structure into action, and this is what we do for them. So we help them to actually get things done into the market and communicate to the market. So putting that into action, those strategies and structures, this is exactly also the topic in China, because you might discover that you have your plan, that you have your structure, you have your outline and target, and this is in terms of getting expansion into China. This is exactly how can you do this in a really diverse country and market. A quick view on some partners and clients, just to give you an outline whom we are working together with. It's yeah, as mentioned, multinational companies, but also small, mid-sized enterprises. The main thing is that we do always focus on a leadership or sales standard and help them to elaborate on their market entry, but also on their current challenges. Let's go to the top management challenges in China. So top management challenges in China, meaning which challenges are out there. Fast growth of workforce and promotion of people. So the companies, the businesses need to kind of manage this kind of growth. Even in the downturn, there might be some people who take advantage, of course, in companies. They have to still manage the growth. This is what we see, and manage teams in an effective way. Young markets and talents with no experience, yeah, the pioneer workforce. So many people really that don't have that fast experience in how to take a company to the next level and how to contribute exactly to the company goals. Many nationalities, as mentioned, and out of my perspective, I believe this opens fabulous opportunities we see in those global markets that come with a lot of different backgrounds, which I see really as a huge and positive area to benefit from. So if you're able to manage the diverse teams, you will definitely take advantage from that. Staff retention, yes, high people turnover, several generations with different needs, of course, and then lack of management sales standards. People don't know how to do it, I mentioned that before. Sharing knowledge across silos, so sharing knowledge across boxes. This is what we see a lot, not only in Western businesses, but also here. And yeah, we need people who are able to connect here, and this is what we will discuss further. High hours, low productivity, so just putting some numbers behind it's more likely 60 hours and 80% output instead of 40 hours work week, if there is something like that out there, and 100% output. So finally, their brand is their promise. So this is what you might also face. You come into the market, you get into new areas, you want to build your brand, or you want to maintain your brand, or further take your brand into a new era. So you have to better make sure that you deliver what you've promised. And this is what our clients say. They have to deliver what they promised, and then they need teams to exactly do this. To put it in a nutshell, it's a global management skill gap that we see, that our clients face. It's engagement issues, it's increasing wages, especially here in China. You know, the companies, especially manufacturing industry, might also move, of course, to other countries like Vietnam. And so we see a softening economy, so this kind of pace of change, and also our clients see that, so it's a lot of uncertainty at the moment in this area. And pretty much new competencies are needed in virtual global teams. And a lot of, this is point number 5 then, a lot of people I personally talk to, they mention that they have difficulties in combining generations. So as there's an old generation, there is a new generation, and how to get them working together, but also how to create sound people development and talent development, and what are the needs of the next generation of leaders, for instance. Let's go on a macro level. I would like to invite you just quickly to go onto a satellite position. So sharing a simple example, basically 3 steps, and probably two vital factors that influence us at the moment. So we can see there's the market and daily obstacles. When we look at the market first, we have and see a demand for qualitative products and services because it's highly competitive. It's similar products and services out there. So it basically means that we have much more speed, which comes through emerging markets. And on the other hand, we have daily obstacles. People have a flood of information and tasks. People have difficulty in selecting really valid information and making good decisions, and also communicate those. So we see speed and complexity, and those are kind of, yeah, screaming for flexibility in people who are able to react flexible on that, or to act proactively, and to also, when looking at complexity, to be focused. Because nowadays it's getting, of course, we all know that, sometimes difficult to focus on what we are striving for. And to cascade that down, what we are going for, and to cascade down your plan, your strategy, this is the point. And let me take you on this 3 steps that I just mentioned. Now, from effectiveness to innovation, what I mean by that is, if you imagine you are a new business person now and open your shop, say to sell mobile phone accessories, so you will open your shop and you will have probably less know-how. You will have know-how in how to trade and how to sell, and so you will do your job over quantity, and you will sell mobile phone accessories and so on. And after a while you may know, okay, how can you do this efficiently? How you can sell more in less time? How can you actually put more qualified know-how in how you do the process, how you probably open up more stores and whatever you're dealing with. And so you're coming from, of course, doing the right things to doing the things right, and we all know that. This sounds all familiar to us. Yet it's important to understand, because I believe the third step would be having more own know-how, creating more own know-how, meaning probably you will develop, to keep that example, you will develop your own mobile phone case, so you can kind of pioneer the future and sell also your own things. We see that with Huawei, mobile phone manufacturer and seller, which is probably the best selling in Asia. And so it's about how to create own innovations and new innovations. Why do we look at this now? Because this is basically the overview from a satellite mode or satellite position, because this is what I believe what we see in Asia as well. Effectivity, creativity, these are the three steps. Some companies are ahead, some are still low, below, and so you can see the green efficiency here. So this is what we believe will get more and more important, and you might also see that in your everyday work. So, and this is a circle. That means it starts again and again. Yeah. If you have been creative, if you have your own things, if your people work on the next level, for your company to get on the next level, to create new things and new stuff for complex and competitive market, then you have always this cycle. And this is important to understand. So when mentioning that kind of step to more know-how, to more growth into quality, we see that it's not only about know-how. It's not only about know-how. Why? Because people probably do know, and we are living in the age of knowledge. But knowledge without doing, I would say, is like not knowing. So we have to do things. We have to get into action and take on the simple steps and the simple things in daily management. So we have to know what to do, what exactly to do, and this also characteristics are the characteristics of an expert. He knows what to do, when to do, and really how he puts it into execution. And this is exactly what we see a lot in China, from also my personal aspects and from what I hear from clients is people, yeah, there are people who know how to do things in the Western world probably, and yeah, people from the Western countries, but what they don't know is how to really do it, how to really do it in a different setting, a different context, in a different culture. So often we see a lack of cultural flexibility, not only for Western or for Eastern managers, but really in diverse areas. And there's a lack of focus. So when we think back of the picture with the complexity, we have a lack of focus very often. So the people losing even track also in intercultural aspects, because the people try probably sometimes to adapt too much. That means trying to get into the culture too much and lose their own. So basically what I believe is what we need a bridge and the best out of, if you might say so, both worlds. And I will give you an example. So when you see this picture now, this drawing here, we also show that to participants, to top managers, to senior leaders, and even to frontline people. So we would ask them, what do you see? What do you see? What can you see? What is the first thing that pops up on your mind? And some say, oh, this looks like a Buddha, or this looks like a myth or a mice, or this looks like some ancient drawings. And another one says probably, yeah, it looks like a Volkswagen Beetle, and you can see in the middle there the headlights and the wheels, and probably you see it now or you don't see it, doesn't matter. What we see is that we have all different kind of angles that we look at such a picture. So that means we are coming from different perception filters, or we have different perception filters with different kind of information and experiences inside. So everything what we have in our habits and everything what we learn from childhood is in our perception filter. And this is the message here. What we see a lot is in companies why they fail, especially also in China, because they don't understand the difference between the multicultural and the intercultural context, which is mentioned here, A, B, C, just next to each other. So that means you're trying to kind of not really adapt, but you try to work on something, probably not really close, not really together, not really sharing. So you build up silos within the culture first, and then within departments, divisions, and you create your boxes. This is what is the most unfortunate happening that we can see. And contrary, the intercultural aspect or the intercultural point of view is working with each other. A plus B equals C, and this is what we strive for. This is also what we share. This is what we promote and support, because companies are just more successful when combining and then taking the best from different areas, from different experiences. I mean, this applies not only to cultures, but also to even similar teams. But I think this is really the point here. And combining those, it means cooperation, it means focus also on similarities, not only on differences. And why do I mention this here? Because this will guide us now also later on to the next point, which is basically focusing on on the similarities, what we have in common. I'm curious about what we will discuss here, maybe later on the Q&A, employing people who. So what we see is that companies are looking for this flexibility, people who are ready to grow and anticipate proactively and go forward. As you can see in this picture here, someone who is just finishing a screw, or someone who is thinking bigger and bigger, being a part of something bigger. So the message is sharing wisdom, ideas, and best practice, really contributing to the overall goals and being invited as an employee to contribute. And this is why we need to communicate also efficiently and combine different perspectives here. So when we talk about those dimensions which were mentioned before in the agenda, what can the 8 dimensions, the cultural dimensions, help us with? We will look in in those cultural dimensions. And before we come to that, let's have a quick intro by looking at a few simple situations where we can see those difficult habits between, I say, the Eastern and the Western world. And when you look at education, very simple. On the left-hand side, you may see, okay, in Western countries, people are more educated in being proactive, going forward, and sticking out of the crowd, whereas in the Eastern part, it's probably more likely to focus and to be in a collective and don't stick out, even if it's positive or negative. So this is also what we see in the management, right? In the companies, in probably meetings where there's the high context culture meeting the low context culture. And probably when you look into management situations where you basically have a team who's not showing up and you cannot pull and engage them, you will end up managing problems because you will take care for yourself. And this is what we see a lot, and this is where we think people need help. Yeah, dealing with problems, how do people in general deal with problems, Western versus Eastern? And this is what a lot of companies struggle with, so that it appears to them that people are not facing really problems, but walking around in another way, that they kind of share hints or share basically other ways of dealing with those problems, so not really directly communicating as well. Now, how can the cultural dimensions help us to grow further in quality? And here's a map. It says the cultural map, and it's by Aaron Meyer, and I would like to share this because I am convinced that this is helping us to better understand what we can do to actually have a successful also expansion into a different kind of culture with diverse workforces. So when we look at the communication part, now dimension communicating, what is a good communicator? So our clients would say, okay, yeah, sure, we face, for example, a multinational company going into China, or I'll say is into China, and dealing with this high context culture, having 22 nationalities on the team. So they distinguish between that kind of explicit and implicit context. So we all know that there is the low and the high context culture, and whereas the US, Canada, Australia, Netherlands, Germany, UK, and so on would be the low context culture where direct communication works. It's more like, yeah, tell your team what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. So it's actually this repetitive style of sharing what you're going to do, like in a presentation. You tell them what you're going to tell them, like I do it right now. I gave an agenda, then you tell them something, and then you tell them what you've told them by doing a conclusion. Whereas the style of communication in probably the high context culture is also totally different, especially when it comes to practical situations at work, where you have to read between the lines, where communication is more layered, much more layered. And for example, in Japan, I picked up a nice word saying kuki yomenai. And kuki yomenai means actually, if you hear that in Japan, you have to be worried, because that means exactly that you're not a good listener because you cannot read the air. So it basically says you got to really listen closely and listen to that totally different style of communication based on probably unconscious assumptions as well. So you have to hear the whole sentence, you have to hear the air, you have to read the air, and this is appears very different to managers coming into Asia. So people ask, okay, what can we do? Yeah, and the biggest mistake, as mentioned, is that the people are thinking that the high context culture is trying to hide information. So and then they fail because over time they get impatient. So what we need is really to see that we have to have open-ended, clarifying questions, that the people do everything to get more information, and this can be established through trust, of course, over the long term, but also to repeat the message again and again and ask more for clarification. One practical hint here, what always helps also clients that we talk to, that they kind of get into a mood if they practice self-irony as well, to lower their status, to get more on a personal relation and to basically be able to connect. So what we can see here as well, repetition for clarification. And this is probably the most important, this communicating part, to be really flexible in changing and adapting and reading also other people by building up that trust and by communicating from different angles, being yet focused on the company goals. And this is the tricky part, right? Evaluating is kind of about the feedback. How can you handle constructive feedback? And this is an interesting journey because people are not, out of my perspective, afraid of feedback. People like feedback, but it's the way you do it. And of course there's a direct and indirect way. And what we strive doing is equipping people mostly with tools so that they can be comfortable in sharing feedback. And it doesn't matter if you're on the top management level, really talking from a CEO to a CFO, or if you in the third or fourth line of management, where you have to force your team or to give also positive feedback, which would be praise to team members. And you may wonder if you ever gave praise to someone in the public, meaning you have your team in front of you and probably some people from high context culture and some people who are not used to get praise and to get even positive feedback in the group. You will be surprised what happens if you praise them in the public, because some would probably not like it. Some would not really like to stand out here as well. So it's quite interesting how to do that. And the people, what they do is reacting on constructive feedback is mostly that people say, okay, we have to tell someone now that something is not okay, and this is the first thing you can do wrong. So it's the attitude that needs to be adjusted here. This is what we share with our clients, and this is what works, because then you have a completely different angle of looking at how to give feedback. So feedback is always something to grow on, and if you know how to do it properly, it is really not only a chance to grow, but a chance to have fun as well. Persuading, how do we persuade? How do we do that? Basically, there are principle-orientated and application-orientated kind of sections, if you might say. And of course, this is a slightly general view on that, because there are this two things of, okay, you go by principles. You have your principles saying we are task orientated and we are specific, we are looking for results only, and you have your arguments ready and your bullets ready and cascading that down. Or it's first more a holistic one where you show kind of different components and show the bigger picture and persuade also with more likely inductive arguments, where you go from the big to the low level, where you say and invite people to understand why you do things. And this is quite interesting in the practical area, because the people are not able, especially people from Western countries, are not able to be flexible on that and to open up a bigger picture why we do things, because people are afraid sometimes to invest more in the beginning, to invest more time. They think they lose, but in fact they will gain much more if they do invest time to invite people to be part of the bigger picture. And it's not that easy because probably people in China are not used to be part of the bigger picture, but this is exactly the challenge, and this is where people and managers need specific tools. Quickly, leading. How do people lead in different kind of cultures, high versus low context? So there is an egalitarian way, which means you will invite your people more, you will have a bottom-up approach maybe, and you will get and take the chance to really create what we call race horses, where you have people who are really standing out and also managing own projects. And these are exactly also those people you can just create if you share responsibility. And this is probably something you might be interested in, how to do that sharing responsibility. A lot of people that I talk to share on this, so it's just almost not possible to share responsibility because people somehow don't want to have responsibility. So how to get people there is basically also understand what their motives are, and not sitting down with them just once, but really understanding them. And there are basically tools on how you can do that, and it starts from the very top management or next management levels, that they force exactly that. Hierarchical, especially local companies, are used to that one, and when we think back to the efficiency chart, we see that also local companies adapt and are likely to adapt because they have to also manage the new generations, and the new generations are seeking for more options of being creative processes and contributing to something. Also, when we look into the high turnover rate of employees, we see that many people are basically changing their job like their clothes every day. So this is a challenge here to get the people and sharing more responsibility, but also manage that flexibility for the people, because people want to have that flexibility, but also you need to manage that clearly. Deciding, how do we decide? More in consensus or more hierarchical again. So if you look into flexible workflow and inattention to results, probably hidden information, this is something that you might connect with consensual, and probably if you have experience already in China, this is what you might face. So goal is to have results and to discover information. And how can you do that? Here we need a close, say, partnership between an employee and a superior, so that we can really get more information, versus the hierarchical one, where you really have like a manifest, it says here, and you're really the boss. Yeah. And I think it needs a mixture here, and depending on what kind of responsibility you want to share. And this means you also need a situational leadership style, which we all also know, but we don't know how to exactly do it. So I refer again to know-how versus do-how. We have a lot of leadership. We have a lot of management philosophies out there. We have a lot of things that we might know from business schools and so on, but we might not know how to do it in everyday work. And this is what we shall know and shall share. Trusting, trust in also giving negative feedback, what we mentioned. So it's building up trust and relationship amongst teams. So in a cognitive-based area or culture, you would have more like a cognitive trust, meaning you have achieved a 10% increase of turnover, so you can look at it and say, wow, hey, great done, Johannes, we have a 10% increase in turnover, and you did it, and great. So a superior talk like this. So he has a cognitive trust. But that doesn't mean that some people are really connected, because people who are working on a relationship-based way of trust, they see results as waving a string effective connection. So it's more likely to be important that you together reach that goal, and this is really fostering the team spirit here. So also, how can you do that again? How can you do that? And through a more personal level, laughing, spending time, and this is exactly where most Western managers can't not connect, because they don't really connect to the culture. They do multicultural but not intercultural management. This agreeing, so tolerance for open disagreement. What we see a lot is that that we have a high degree of vulnerability in especially high context culture teams, where people just got together in a intercultural team, and so the people sense a lot of destroyed relationship when some project doesn't work, and it's not mainly because of the results that were not achieved, but because of the way people are not able to communicate with. So they would rather distract the relationship, and people leave because of lack of connection to their superior instead of any other reason. So direct disagreement is something that can really destroy. This is the message here. What we have in Western countries is we differentiate between a behavior and a person, and which is fine. But if you go into high context culture, you cannot just do this, but you have to really build up trust even before you openly discuss that you're disagreeing to something. So this is also one factor, and which is most likely an important one, because if you cannot establish the collegial relationship, your team is probably messed up, especially when you have a team member who is probably promoted and has to lead a local team now. Before he was on the team, and now he's getting the manager of this. So not an easy one here. Scheduling as the last one, very clear to me, and probably also to you, of course. It's on the one hand, we say time is limited as Western, coming from the Western culture, and flexible time is more likely in the Eastern world, or in China as well. So you might also experience that probably in Arabic countries, but the thing is that things are in flow. Terms like momentum is important, and get more and more important than any other. And if you come with a fixed timeline, it's not about the timeline, but it's about how can you connect really the people, how can you connect to the people, to why you're doing things, and what is the impact if you're not going to reach that by this or this date. So or meetings, so this is really a different value here, and you got to manage it. How can we do that? So putting those 8 dimensions into a last perspective, pushing and pulling people is the clue here. How can we somehow push the people? So that means, okay, probably somehow, sometimes being more direct, even when we talk across cultures. And how can we pull people and find out the motives? And what we do is we do this, we do help companies and our partners to have just high-level management tools, means practical tools that they can use. And you can see here just a few bullets. Basically, how can you handle your expectations? How can you make sure that the people know what you do? And here's something you might consider. You have to repeat that message. This is what I meant before as well with managers who have not enough patience. It's about communicating expectations. It's about following up. It's about repeating the message again and again. And the thing is, people are not used to it, especially in the Asian region or in China. They're not used to have that clear expectations, and you have to repeat it. They are not trained. If you look into, if you're a manufacturer and you look into actually a plant, and you have 200 employees and they work probably on the line, then you have to train them, you have to do things again and again. Please shut the door, because if the steam goes out, we have this and that, and you have to do this again and again. So people are not trained, so you have to do this. And the same appears in management. So you have to do this again and again, formulating concrete targets, specific targets, handling emotional situations, sense them, having targets included, clear targets, target-based management, what we also know as management by objectives. But how to do it? We know this term, but we don't know how to do it. So how do we do it? And our partners do know how to do it. They do know how to monitor targets. They do know how to manage those intercultural differences by looking on similarities, by building up relationship, by making the connection between the future of the company and the people. Yeah, we mentioned that, feedback and so on, progress dialogue. So there are many. And when we look at the practical example, what we did for a multinational as well, they have those kind of 5 values. These are their values, and what you can see on the right-hand side and left-hand side, there are the descriptions. So what does act with integrity mean for them? We take responsibility. We are accountable. We are fair in all aspects. So describing those values, or collaborating together, sharing knowledge, seek to understand customers and clients, innovate to improve efficiency. We constantly strive for the highest standards. Or is it thinking like an entrepreneur? We are bold to succeed and we seek for new opportunities. So when you look at those 5 values, and it's nice, and you will look at any website out there and you will see a lot of nice values, but they are not lived. So what do we do? What do we do to make them come alive? And now when we switch to the next one is exactly with practical tools. Exactly with practical tools where we can show how to do that. How can we take on responsibility? Also as managers, but also cascading that down to our employees. So we can take responsibility, we can have the monitoring targets dialogue, we can have written preparations and follow up. How can we do that exactly? What tool can we have therefore? What kind of conflict dialogue can we have? And so on and so on. You can see a lot of tools on the right-hand side which are supporting those kind of values. And why did I choose those values? Because those values are quite general in the sense that they are applying to many of probably also your goals and your values and your team spirits. Let me round up and finish those ideas by having a look at the common needs and the upcoming needs in what we see with our partners in the market. Common needs are that there is still a need for entrepreneurial and innovative thinkers, but they're kind of getting less, so it's a generation issue again. And that there are coming global issues with a lot of nationalities coming in the teams. So you have everybody around the world communicating with each other, and projects that strive on achievement. So achievement orientated. And when you look into the other side, upcoming needs is more likely providing sincere and frequent guidance for people and employees, especially for those who are not used to have say that direction or feedback. Those who are probably striving for clear goals and expectations. So you have to lead really teams by those tools and kind of cultivating this patience that we mentioned earlier as well. Promoting this, you have heard about work-life balance, and we all do know that this is getting more important. So coming from live to work to work to live. So people are more interested in what is in for them, what is the benefit. They also don't want to be told too much what they should do, but they would like to be invited, and this is a big issue for managers, because this actually is not that easy to do. So again, what we see, the common management is command and control management. This is also what we see a lot in Asia still, and sometimes rigid and conservative. Also coming from an employee, seeing that from an employee side, being self-interested. So meaning, hey, if I get $5,000 more this month, renminbi, then I'm off to another company. So it's really about how can you connect the people. So in the new leadership area, we see empowerment and the trust-based management. We see innovative characters and open, agile characters and traits. A collective interest that is built up through engagement, through people who are interested again in the company's goals and not only in their self-interest. So these are things that are getting more important in the future. And referring to the low versus the high context again, because we mentioned this. Interestingly, low context, good communication is precise, simple and clear. That means the messages are direct and understood at face. You talk to somebody, you directly shoot the feedback or the constructive feedback, and repetition is appreciated if it helps to clarify the communication, it says here. But yet, of course, and we do management training since 1995 as well in the Western world, detours are sometimes required. And as you can see, the same is happening with the high context culture as well. Detours are also sometimes required. Why? Because, okay, good communication in the high context culture is sophisticated, nuanced, layered, and you have to read the air. So sometimes, pretty often I would say, people complain about that there is nothing clear. So this is the similarity I see here. So as a result, and this is also mentioned by Erin Meyer, over the 8 dimensions of cultures, is that intercultural teams, and this is an important message here, intercultural teams are basically better managed by a more low context manner, not a low context culture, but a low context manner. Why is that? Because, and this is also what we see, because you meet at a certain level of similarity. You will delegate a task and you will make it clear. If you do that in China as a Western manager and communicate a clear target, direct and very results orientated, your employee will probably, coming from a high context culture, will not understand exactly maybe what you mean, even if you directly say it. But this is what I mean. You have to repeat that message, and you have to get also to a stage where you're a good listener. That means you have to first open the people so that they are able to talk, so that they feel comfortable to talk. So you need to establish trust again. And therefore you need a number of tools that help you to establish that help you to be confident in talking to the people, even from different backgrounds. And this is the point here. And if you say now, okay, Johannes, may I challenge you, and maybe we can have this in the Q&A, why can you say that the low context communication is more appropriate within international or multinational teams? Is the simple fact that I believe even if a high context, an employee from a high context culture talks to another high context culture, even then there are a lot of misunderstandings. Why? Because they all talk around, I wouldn't say around the bush, but they talk a lot and no one probably can read the air, can read between the lines. And what they do in those situations is also refer back to a more low context, to a more direct one. That means you have to make up rules, you have to make up clear ways of how do you go forward, and then it works as well. This is what we see and experience. Conclusion, we have intercultural teams that succeed, that's what I just said, with a low context communication. We have to agree on how to work together, making up rules, and explain why we do things. So inviting really the people and repeating the message and having fun and being engaged and energized to repeat the message and bring the people up to a point where they're motivated. And a lot is done here with the attitude, but the attitude also needs the right tools. What are my wishes for you that you can ensure to be successful in the future, to survive the downturn? That means that you look into your goals and be able to execute them, probably by using simple tools that you have on hand maybe already, so you can grow smartly, and applying the push and pull effect really, and really know how can you do that, how can you push and pull, what is the difference, and also how can you get the people motivated. Thank you for the moment, and Christina, I'm looking forward now for your takeover.
Thank you, Johannes. There we go. Yeah, so in relation to the Q&As, I'd like to ask the first question, which is a question from me. What I see with a lot of my clients is they don't necessarily have a management structure in China, or at least the real decision makers and those that are distributing the information are based overseas, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the US. What do you say to companies that have that type of structure in terms of passing on a clear message to the employees, to the staff? How do you help them in that situation?
Yes, this is a very, very good question. Why is it a very good question, Christina? Because the thing is, I experience it myself as well. With Proactive, we are a company as well, and we are a business as well. That means we are also originated from Germany. That means we also had to adapt. And there are two ways I would like to answer this question. Number one is making sure that the managers who are in the foreign country, who are in China, have to be very confident and also very very effective in sharing with the headquarters, maybe in different cultures, different countries, what's going on. So someone who does not have the real life experience in China can not understand. And so decisions are probably made that are not adapted before. So the first message and answer would be to give and share more information with the headquarters how things really work in this part of the world, and therefore we also need to be able to communicate in a certain way, to communicate also expectations and share that. So, and the second part is how to translate those messages to employees. Is basically also how can you communicate decisions, probably difficult decisions. How can you do that in a way that people are engaged, right? And here we see a lot of inconfidence, and as I mentioned before, it starts really with the attitude, and then the people don't know how to cascade things down and how to manage that. And there we see really that big lack of communicational tools. So for me, the answer is really people are not able on a daily basis to communicate. They are not able to monitor targets. They might give out the target and then they wait and hope instead of really managing actively. That's why the title is Proactively Steer Through the Downturn.
Hmm. And the next question is in relation to the management that you have on the ground that is steering your team and steering your staff. What do you see today? I'll give you my perspective, but I'm curious to know from you who's actually physically doing the management trainings, what do you see today in terms of management teams? Is it mixed cultures? Is there a Chinese management and Western management together to kind of foster and integrate the cultures and help the communication? Or do you still see very much Western focused, or are you seeing companies localize? And I'm not referring more to multinationals, I'm referring really to this SME target group.
Mm-hmm. Example of a company that is newly acquired, say this is what we do in Shanghai at the moment as well. So company who is has a long record and history, and now having a local company in Shanghai. So 2 years ago that was the merge, and now they're having a local management. So they are supporting really local heads. Of course, there's a headquarter behind, but really engaging also local people to manage their teams. And therefore, they equip them with their know-how, with their management know-how. But in the end of the day, it's about how do you reach the market. And the biggest gap is in translating what basically how can you translate the product or the services into the market. So where's the lack of transforming, of talking to the customer, to the client. And for the management part, how can they, because your question refers to how do they structure their management team, right? Is it Western and local? So what we see is there is sometimes a mixture, but if you have a mixture, a team that is, say, Western and local team, you need to have, say, one CEO that clearly can steer and understand and be able to share the message from the headquarter and to cascade that message down. And I have never seen one single example where you say, okay, oh, this is a local market, so we need only local people. This also is not something that appeared to me, because I believe also it exactly needs that mixture. I mean, depending on your business model. But if you really want to act as an SME and not only going into China, but probably also you have other stakeholders, which at least you communicate with, you have to have a more intercultural basis, and this reflects also a lot of partners in the management. So mixed would be the answer here. So mixed teams that know how to deal with each other, because I think we have to build a bridge between those, if you say, two worlds.
And do you see a lot of Western individuals in China working for Chinese management individuals, and how are those relationships and how's the communication in that regard? Because most of the time people always assume management is Western and then the employees are Chinese, but I do see a lot more and more that employees are mixed. You have a certain percentage that are Western that also speak Chinese, and then you have a certain percentage
Yes.
that are Chinese and speak Chinese, and they're all reporting to Chinese management. How does that communication work? I know personally a lot of Westerners that are never happy to work directly for Chinese management, but how do you see it from a training perspective?
Yes, very, very clear. First of all, I think Western managers have to upgrade their mindset and have to more happy to work for Eastern managers, because this will probably also in Europe someday, or in the Western world, be existent. So I think it's what I see is that the management style of a local is really sometimes even direct. If you take the example of the typical local Chinese company, you have probably one leader and many people who execute, and so the one leader is responsible for everything, and this is not going to be efficient, and this is what we exactly talked about just before. So such thing need a management which is more flexible, which allows to share responsibility, either if it's a Western or Eastern manager. And the Western manager, referring to your question, has to be able to repeat, to be able to create clear communicational patterns, such as communicating expectations. So yeah, this would be the situation. I think this is what is your experience in that area with the Western manager coming to, or your situation you have in mind with a Western manager coming to Asia and being under some local management?
Well, I think the issue is more they arrive in China. It's already a cultural shock just from a cultural perspective to be there, and then to work for a Chinese manager or general manager or whomever. It's obviously very different styles of management. So of course initially I think there's a lot of frustration that exists, but over time, I think once you understand the processes and understand, how they do things, it's fine. I think it's a matter. It's in a game in China. It's always a game of patience and how to limit your frustrations. So I think it's a matter of how long can you deal with it, and are you a fast learner? Can you learn to manage the system and manage the people in a certain way? It's never easy, but I think it's like that anywhere you move to in the world where you don't understand the culture and you might not understand the mind frames of the individuals.
Exactly, and I would like to add, it's probably the same in any culture, right? You have to be flexible, adapt flexible. If you can't do that, you can get to know how it works with kind of anyone. So, and when coming to China, I totally agree, there is this culture shock. So yes, coming over this cultural shock and being able to adapt more quickly, to understand and reading the air, like the Japanese say, then you're much quicker. And probably you're a Western manager and having now a local superior, then it's probably sometimes the case that you might say, yeah, I need clear expectations, I need clear goals, I don't see what should I do, what is the timeline. So you probably have to be patient as well and communicate also those expectations and trying to get more information. So it's the same way than the other round. If you're in the leadership position or not, you have to seek for more information and understand, and therefore we have to listen. As a manager, being in a manager position, probably even more, because as a manager you cannot just stay home or go away and problems are solved. So you have to lead the team to a higher level.
I think that the main issue that I see in China with companies that are moving to that location is that you know, their objective and their goal is to make sales, or it's to reduce profit, you know, or increase profit, reduce cost, and that's what their focus is, and that's what their people should be focusing on. And people have the tendency then to forget about the human nature, to forget how to communicate with your staff. They forget how to be transparent with the staff, because they're so busy in their day-to-day objectives and targets of the overall company and of the overall business.
Exactly.
And obviously, to run your business, you need the human capital side of things. So you have to work out a balance. And obviously, from the clients that I have, many of them can't afford to have a HR division. So I think it is important to, at least from abroad or whoever's traveling into China, to take that moment of a day or two to communicate, to talk to your staff, understand what's going on. And from my perspective and from my own industry, I think it's a great way to find out whether there's fraud that's existing, whether there are other things you should, sometimes people don't want to communicate because they don't want to know what the problems are, but that's an important aspect for them solving in the future. Well, Johannes, we're already over time, and I think people are slowly drifting off to get back to work. So I do want to mention to everyone, you know, Johannes's contact details are here on the slides, and there are mine. So if you would like to have a direct introduction, then by all means let me know, or contact Johannes directly. Just one last comment. We do have our final webinar, which will be shown tomorrow. It's deadlines for annual compliance and audits in China, and it will go through details about those specific requirements. So if you are interested, then please do subscribe. All of our webinars are being posted on our YouTube channel and shared also on our LinkedIn page. So feel free to pass on that information from our social media sites to your colleagues, to your friends, to share on the information. Johannes, thank you very much for joining us and for presenting today.
Pleasure, Christina.
And for everybody else, I wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you and goodbye.